Yay! Once again, Johnny.
Every time.
Every time. Perfect introduction. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. Still kind of morning for me. To all of GitOpsians. There we go. That's my word. We are quick announcements. I had announcements. I forgot my announcements. Good job. We are not awake. That's what we are. So whatever. We'll go straight into the episode. I give up. So a few weeks ago, we had Andrew Block on the stream, and we were talking about OCI and Argo and all those fun things. And we got into talking a little bit about validated patterns. And, our good friend Martin Jackson was in the comments and was like, yeah, that's right. Every validated patterns is a GitOps pattern. And I was like, we got to go back over this. It's been too long. So lucky for me, we were able to get a real quick turnaround with Marty's time on that. So he is here. I'll let him introduce himself a little bit. And then for those who've never seen it before, we're going to go back over probably what validated pattern is and then what that team is doing. And then Johnny's going to pretend like him and Martin do not work together every day and join me in playing, I don't know, in playing newbie to the topic.
I have so many questions, Marty.
Right? We're ready to go.
We'll see what we can do to answer them as the stream goes on. I know it's a new and challenging topic for you. So,
Indeed.
I'll be patient.
Indeed. Thank you. I'm the village idiot, so you're going to have to be nice. All right.
The water almost came out my nose with that. Oh, man, that was funny. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, we could do this all day.
Yes.
We really can. I mean, I'm the southerner here, so I get to be the slow one, right?
That's right.
Oh, yes. Introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Martin Jackson. I am an engineer on the Red Hat Validated Patterns team. I've been on the Validated Patterns team since I joined Red Hat almost 3 years ago. And on the patterns team, I'm responsible for implementing new features in the framework and helping make decisions about what patterns we develop and kind of shepherding people through the process of developing new patterns. For people who aren't internal to Red Hat, Johnny and I are on the team together, and we have been working together for about 2.5 years now. Johnny joined the team not too long after I did.
So, validated patterns, right? What does that mean?
Well, the short version is that the way we introduce validated patterns to people is that most people who've been around the technology industry for a while are familiar with reference architectures. Reference architectures are this big, glorious documents that come up in doc format, PDF format, that describe a whole bunch of technologies that may solve a particular problem. And they describe, in particular, how you would solve a particular problem by assembling all those technologies together. Well, a validated pattern is like a reference architecture in that it involves putting a bunch of technologies together. But unlike a reference architecture, a validated pattern is delivered as an actual repository that you can install and run on your very own OpenShift cluster if that is what you are interested in doing. So it has the characteristics of reference architectures in the sense that it has a bunch of technologies that are designed to work together, but it is, we consider an enhanced reference architecture in the sense that it is designed to actually run and be delivered. And yes, I'm paying the cat tax, as you can see. Now, Lauren, crying out loud.
Wait. No, we got to show the cat to the camera, and then
Okay.
What is the cat's name?
The cat's name is Mallory. He is named because we had an older and larger standard ISO standard cat named Oakley. And because we thought he would be much bigger than Oakley, we named him Malorn after the trees in the Lord of the Rings. He actually weighs 8.5 pounds, so he is about half Oakley's size.
He's a cutie pie. And he is convinced he's part of the stream. It's okay. My dog used to before he passed away, my dog liked to invite himself to be on the streams quite a bit.
Yes. Well, I am not surprised. He loves the camera, and I think he has a sixth sense for when it's on. But yeah, he is now flopped over on his side and demanding belly rubs off camera.
Oh, good for him.
So he will probably continue to feature in this episode in some way, form, or fashion.
I love it.
Where was I? Reference architectures. So a validated pattern, because of its need to run in CI, because it's delivered as a software artifact, is something that we can also run through CI/CD. And at the very beginning, we recognized that the best way to make these things CI/CD-able was to implement them using the OpenShift GitOps operator. And so every validated pattern is founded on the principles of GitOps. And we adhere to the four main open principles of the Open GitOps project pretty aggressively. The state is maintained in Git. The patterns themselves are immutable. Changes are automatically pulled from the repository. This is how we develop these things. And in our experience, this is a great way of highlighting interesting technologies that Red Hat has developed. And several groups internally inside Red Hat have found some value in using our framework to demonstrate some of the more complex and involved operators and other add-ons for OpenShift. And as by way of example, the OpenShift GitOps operator itself is managed in a GitOps way using our operator. Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management is a key part of our framework, and we use that when we have spoke clusters to manage, and in some cases provision. We have a pattern that features the Ansible automation platform running under OpenShift. We have that same pattern also supports OpenShift virtualization. So hot right now. Using the Mugatu meme from Zoolander.
OpenShift virtualization is actually a really big topic right now. Like, it's legitimately is something that I'm hearing about. At least I don't know how much that is. It must be a topic of conversation outside of Red Hat, right? Because otherwise I would never hear about it because I'm not in sales or marketing. Like, I'm in SRE, right? So if I'm in reliability engineering and I'm hearing about it, it must be big.
It is.
From somebody that didn't even attend Summit, it was like a massive topic at Summit. Like it was like AI, virtualization. Like they were like probably the two biggest topics. And I didn't even go, but just based off of like the stuff that you're seeing on LinkedIn and stuff like that, like it's a pretty big topic.
It's big. It's a huge topic, but it's a complex thing too, because you're talking about sort of shoehorning this whole branch of technology, which is not inherently declarative, and people are not used to managing VMs in a declarative way. And shoehorning it into this thing that is declarative and trying to make it as declarative as you can. And so, like, people, the experience of managing VMware clusters, people are very used to having either a GUI or an automation framework to do a bunch of things with their VMware clusters, but there's not really a good declarative way to say, reboot this machine, and if it's been rebooted in the last 15 minutes, don't reboot it again. There are so many things about VM administration that are inherently imperative. And in many ways, trying to find this boundary between what is purely declarative and what is, imperative and can be made to look more imperative is one of the things that has attracted to and kept me on the validated patterns team, because it's a very interesting boundary to explore. And we've done a bunch of that exploration within the patterns framework. So in addition to trying to have patterns that highlight many of the key operators that Red Hat is trying to highlight for various reasons, we've also undertaken to provide a useful framework for distributing secrets within OpenShift using HashiCorp Vault and the external secrets operator. Recently, I put a new feature into the pattern framework that allows for more optionality in the secrets backend, that allows you to use either the native Kubernetes backend with the external secrets operator, or to not use a backend for secrets at all if you want to not use it. This is what we call supported mode, because Red Hat Services has some very specific constraints on what sorts of technologies services can sign off on supporting.
That's pretty cool. So while you were talking, I was poking around the validated patterns, because like shame on me, right? I haven't been keeping good track of what's happening and what's in, and I don't. I noticed that I'm going to actually share my screen, I think, so that everybody is talking about the same thing.
Yeah, the last time I was on the show, there were like 4 patterns in total, and now there are about 20.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of interest in the patterns framework, especially coming from our partner community. We've been working very extensively with a group of developers out of Poland that work for Intel, and they have developed a number of patterns that feature the various Intel hardware acceleration features that are available in the new Xeon chips. So things like SGX, which is software guard extensions, AMX, which is, I forget what AMX is short for, and QAT, which is quick assist technology. AMX is an accelerator for linear algebra, so it can make your AI workloads run faster. And QAT is a technology for accelerating startup time for SSL connections. So it's very big with load balancing and high volume websites. It can dramatically reduce the core count that you need to serve, SSL, TLS connections. And everybody is doing SSL and TLS these days because of the rising security threats in the environment. So Intel, because of the complexity of enabling these technologies in actual workloads, and because of the potential complexities of making software be aware of them, Intel thought it would be interesting to develop patterns that would highlight to people how they could enable these things themselves, as well as show how they're used in actual real world, relatively practical use cases.
Well, and something cool that I think that Intel did too is they took some of our existing patterns, right? And then they added their extensions into the pattern, introducing new operators like the network feature or the node feature discovery, right, where it goes out,
Yep.
pulls the nodes that it's hosted on, and then gets the hardware IDs and stuff like that from that, and then uses like taints and tolerations to schedule like whatever on there, right? But then they were also able to use like their extensions to like add precision, like especially in medical diagnosis, that it's got the MLOps workflow that's already kind of built into it. And then they were able to use their extensions to go in and like get that much better, right? It was making decisions faster, and it's proof is in the pudding type of results, right? They can actually come back and say, look, here's how it was yesterday without AMX. Here's how it is today with AMX. So it's pretty cool that like they're able to actually show you like legitimate results coming from like their hardware extensions. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And they're a good group of guys to work with too, or a good group of people to work with.
Yeah, they're not all guys, but most
yes,
of them
exactly.
Yeah, and honestly, Intel got such good results by doing this exploratory engineering work that the accelerated medical diagnosis pattern was featured in the Lenovo booth at Summit. And I was at Summit. I was helping do Ansible booth duty and working on a couple of other things, at Summit. Summit for Red Hatters is a very different kind of experience than it is when you're a customer. I went to Summit a bunch of times as a customer, and it's a fantastic time. But as a customer, you do not have any visibility into all of the running around and crazy stuff that happens on the back end to get the right Red Hatters to talk to you sometimes. But anyway, as a Red Hatter, I had booth duty, I had other things to work on, and so I didn't go to the Lenovo booth because we hadn't done any work directly with Lenovo, and there just didn't seem to be a reason. But one of the Intel people that we'd worked with on the pattern framework came by and said, "Did you see the validated patterns exhibit at the Lenovo booth?" And the what? Where? You're kidding me, right? Yeah, I had no idea that they were doing it, and so. I go and they have this whole, 2 or 3 minute video that explains the pattern and what Intel had done to accelerate it. We talked about other plans that Intel had to feature some of the hardware specific features that are available in Xeon and the Lenovo server line specifically. And then after that, I ran into the original author of the medical diagnosis demo, Guillaume Moutier, who's a Red Hatter from Canada, and he was completely blown away that his demo was still running and being used, and that people were still finding value in it 4 years after he'd originally written it. So that was a pretty special thing at Summit to be able to work through. But it's a big part of the whole collaboration story. Guillaume was the one who originally came up with the demo and the pattern. Johnny and others on our team wound up patternizing it, turning it into a validated pattern. We've maintained it for a couple of years through a bunch of OpenShift releases. It was particularly painful, I know, when they updated the Grafana infrastructure and operator. We kept it running, and that's what our CI/CD system told us, that these things are broken, these things need to be fixed. Okay, we'll go and fix that stuff. So we maintained it. It's still running, and then that meant that Intel was able to pick it up with confidence to add their AMX acceleration technology to it. Lenovo was impressed enough with it to feature it in their demo booth at Summit and show it off to people. And who knows where these patterns are going to go in the future, and this pattern in particular.
I don't think I've ever written anything that has a 4-year staying power. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
that's an eternity.
It is. It is. It really is. And like when you're dealing with some of these, like it just goes to show like the OpenShift framework, right? The ecosystem of OpenShift it goes to show how solid it is. And that's the shameless plug on OpenShift, right? Like it has been rock solid. There's been some like open source, like Grafana they upgraded their entire API group. So they went from like something greatly to like they changed the whole scheme, and like it was basically a rewrite of like the Grafana deployment inside of our medical diagnosis. But like serverless, ODF, a lot of the core operators that we use to deploy medical, like by and large, they've been consistent for pretty much this entire time, right? There's been spec changes and stuff like that, which you can expect, but for the most part, like it's been pretty stable and consistent. It's just like these little, obviously you have to grow and evolve, and I think Grafana did that. And because they're a community operator, it doesn't get communicated nearly as well as maybe like hey, ODF is going to change everything. So like we're pretty much the last to find out when CI hits it and fails.
But that's why we have CI. Like
100%. Yeah.
It's the purpose. That's the whole point. That's the
Yep.
shtick, as they say. I was gonna say we're allowed to shamelessly plug OpenShift. I think we're still technically part of the like OpenShift office hours, right? Isn't that
Yes.
loosely related at this point, but still kind of part. I think it's still part of the branding. So I think we're allowed to shamelessly plug OpenShift. I feel like we get a pass on that.
All right. Good.
Yes, and one thing I will take this opportunity to point out that while most of our patterns are OpenShift patterns, we also have a variant of the GitOps framework that uses Ansible automation platform as its GitOps engine in lieu of OpenShift. And so I was the original developer for that, still maintaining it. Would love to get a larger presence for it on the website. It is still considerably more experimental and not as well tested as the OpenShift variant of the framework, but it is very important to us to say and communicate publicly that we believe that GitOps is not exclusively an OpenShift technology. You can do more things with GitOps on OpenShift potentially than in other places, and this is actually a conversation that Christian Hernandez and I had, before he left Red Hat. There are inherent limitations to the level of declarativeness that you can have with a platform that's not built to be declarative in the first place. But even with those things, you can still approach a number of things using a GitOps mindset and using GitOps tooling, and you can experience very good results with that.
Yeah, I think as GitOps has been evolving, especially in the industry, right? It's definitely more like it would be hard, but you could do GitOps in a non-cloud native environment. It's not even, actually, it's not even like that hard, really. It's less observable for a monolith in certain than it is in microservices, but like you could do it. I mean, that's where we got all of our learnings anyway, was in those exact environments. So yeah, definitely 100% agree with you on that. It's definitely about the methodology. It's about the practice more so than it is any one particular technology. And I think as an industry, as we, I think we're seeing like, I don't know, my like kind of perspective is I think we're seeing a little bit of a renaissance of hardware, like utilization, right? Comparative to like, there was the really big cloud transformations. Cloud transformation is still a very relevant thing, but due to like things like data sovereignty or just needing like failover environments and a bunch of other regions, the uptick of IoT, we're seeing a lot more on-prem stuff. And, we see, some industry trends are kind of starting to, I guess, even out, right? I think it was Netflix who recently said, wait a minute, we went back to the monolith. And this gets into the conversation, like Marty, you and I were having this a little bit when we were chatting ahead of time, is using the right thing at the right time. And I think then we start adopting, validated patterns is like an exact great, example of this type of thing. We start adopting a set of practices, a set of reference ways of doing things, whether it's an exact set of reference architecture or just more of this means you do these things, and the implementation details start becoming a little bit less important. It's definitely something that we've just kind of been talking about on a lot of levels, right? That translates to a lot of levels. In the SRE land, I work on Azure, Red Hat, OpenShift, and there's also, I don't remember what ROSA stands for, Red Hat, OpenShift, something, AWS.
AWS?
I forget what the S stands for.
I think it's OpenShift Service on Amazon.
Is it service? Okay, that must be it. I'm going to lose my job now. They're going to be like, how are you a team lead in this organization? You can't remember what the S in ROSA stands for, right?
That's not the one you work on.
It's not the one I work on. Right. So we've been talking a lot about this because, right, we need to have this homogenized customer experience. Like that's the goal. That's the vision. That's the, I'm going to use the word North Star, even though everybody hates North Star, but that's the North Star. That's the direction. But we have the reality and the implementation details and you can actually see this if you go look at OpenShift's code base itself, right? You'll see all of the things that have to be done that are like specific to Azure and all things that have to be done that are specific to AWS, right? So we start getting down to like outcomes, right? We start talking about like user journeys and golden paths and whatever your flavor of referencing that type of thing is. And the rest starts becoming implementation details. So it can be GitOps and Ansible. It can be GitOps and Argo. It can be GitOps and Kubernetes operator. It can be GitOps, and next episode's going to be on Hive. If you don't know what Hive is, tune in 2 weeks, right? Like that starts to become like more and more important as this whole space is getting more and more mature, which again makes it even more impressive that one of our demos has a 4-year staying power. I am not getting over that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a lot of the ideas that are expressed in it were ahead of their time when Guillaume originally wrote the demo. But it shows it's important because it helps with a true real world problem, and that is helping determine based on X-ray imagery whether a patient is likely to have pneumonia or not. Because otherwise you have to have a trained radiographer look at a picture of a pair of lungs and say yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe, and when you get humans get tired, and people can make mistakes when they're tired, and machines don't. Not for the same reasons, at least. They don't get tired. Machines can definitely make mistakes, but at least this demo shows if a machine says I'm not sure, that doesn't mean that the picture goes off into the ether. That means that a human being then has to make a dedicated human being has to make a determination. But that means that you can save like 90% of the time of that person for the real fence cases, the edge cases, as opposed to the really obvious ones. Yeah, clearly not. Clearly yes. Machines can do that work, and really a lot of the last 400 or 500 years of human history have been about sort of doing that at different levels of human endeavor. We wouldn't be designing and flying in airplanes if we thought that human labor was sufficient. Yeah, it's fast. Horses are fine. Horses solve all of our transportation problems.
I mean, horses are still pretty great. I'm terribly allergic to them. They'll kill me if I touch them, but like they're pretty great. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, so it's actually interesting. So I was actually like slight divergence, right? I was talking to my doctor. I went to my doctor because I have a bad shoulder, and I actually also just had to have x-rays, and it was so 2 different doctors involved here, right? And so my first doctor, she asked me, she goes, what do you think about this whole AI thing? Is it going to replace me? Do I get to retire? And I told her, I was like, it's not going to replace your human judgment anytime soon. I said, by the time I can replace your human judgment, I will be retired on the beach with a Mai Tai. Like, it's going to replace me before it replaces you. So she's like, okay, well, I guess I'll figure out a retirement plan that's different than AI then, right? She was obviously joking, but she was talking about that. But we kind of did talk a little bit more at length about, the way that it can expedite identifying where human judgment is required. Right? Make humans more efficient, because I don't want to have to sort through, in my case, right? I don't want to have to sort through a bunch of useless log lines. Mm-hmm. I want something to go tell me what the probably useful log lines are. And then I get to go do that, because I don't want to be one of my S3 friends at IBM. She said S3 is not your. I always say S3 is not your sysadmin, right? She always says S3 is not your log inspector. But what is your log inspector? I'm hoping we get to use AI for that, right? So that maybe is our next validated pattern. I don't know if that could be a validated pattern. I bet it could. I think we could make that happen.
Oh yeah, sure.
I'm sure. Yeah,
we've got a whole bunch of things that are in flight using the Red Hat OpenShift AI Operator. All you'd need would be a model that knows how to identify the lines that you're interested in, and some sample data. Crank it through. Yeah. The whole point of being the framework is that the individual use cases of the framework are less interesting to the engineering team that's working on the framework than potentially the ability to generate new use cases and interesting new things for people. We've got a lot. There are a lot of things that the framework can do now, but by testing the framework to see if you can do the thing that you're interested in doing, if you find a gap, we'd love to hear about it so we can, find a way to include that capability or capabilities that enable that feature that you want.
I'm actually looking through, and maybe Johnny, you can share the screen. I tried to share the screen, and I'm sure you all noticed that then my Chrome crashed, and I had to restart. Fortunately, only had to restart Chrome. The computer stayed on, which was not the case a few weeks ago. My computer was crashing. I had to actually downgrade my kernel version. That was a whole fun thing. So there we go. So I was going through this. I was actually, Johnny, I was looking at the contributor guide because we were kind of talking about exactly who is a pattern developer, right? Marty was just talking about this. And by the way, I think, oh, look, now my cat has joined the stream. This is a Menti. She is 15, and she is also about 8.5 pounds. Yes. Anyhow, I don't remember what I was saying. The cat jumped on my lap. I got distracted. Somebody told me smart. Was I trying to even be smart? I don't know.
Who's a
pattern developer? Yes, thank you. And I hope the answer is because this is an open source project. It could be you, people in the audience, not you people I'm actually literally talking to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Johnny and I are pattern developers. We've been pattern developers, but we developed the framework so that other people can develop interesting things with the framework.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add on to that too is that when at the end of the day, we don't want to be the gatekeepers to you going out and using the framework, right? We want people to use the framework and then come back to us and say, hey, look, here's how I used it. You know what I mean? And I think when we have this contributor guide, it's really about okay, where are you trying to go? Are you just trying to put something in this framework and see how it works and then share it out? Do you want it to go into some kind of CI? Do you want it to go into some maintained level? Are you doing something that might get reused by consulting or even other SREs or something like that? You know what I mean? And I think when you start thinking at that scale, that's where we really kind of come in and help kind of bridge that gap from getting it from being out in GitHub to getting it where we're pointing to it from our doc site or we're pointing to it from one of our GitHub organizations or something like that. And then we're talking about CI testing and how often we're going to do it and just some of the core artifacts that you need to make it legit, for lack of a better word, like an architecture diagram. What are all the operators that are involved? What are any open source operators? What are some of the configs that we have to do? And then the other part would be documentation. How the hell do I use this thing? Okay, great. I've run make install and it's completed successfully. Now what? How do I know if this thing's actually working? And I think that's where Marty, myself, Michele, our team, we come together with the person that's developing this, and we really trying to help steer that conversation, or at least really guide the conversation and say, hey, look, here's what you need. Here's some good examples, and then have that stuff come back, and then we get it out on the site, and next thing you know, it's rolling, and people are using it. It's medical diagnosis 4 years later. Everybody's talking about it, so.
Yeah. Well, maybe on that infinite time that I don't have, I'll go do the, validated pattern for identifying important logs from a system. That'll be the. Hopefully, somebody is actually watching this goes and does that for me. Is really what I'm hoping for. Just credit me with the idea when you do it.
So on the Asking OpenShift admin stream, there's the observability teams coming on, and they're talking about doing a bunch of stuff with the observability operator and AI and stuff like that. So that might be a good opportunity to take some of the work that they're doing and kind of attach to some of the stuff that you're talking about, right? Like a log inspector or something like that. I don't know, but I think the one point that I just wanted to make really quick was right in the pre-show when I came in, you and Marty were talking about not reinventing the wheel. So the whole idea here is you start at probably multi-cloud GitOps, right? It's the basic, that's the hello world of validated patterns. So you'd start there and then you'd add on your capability from there. And then that's how you make it better. Or if you're going to just reuse medical diagnosis completely, you could take that and then just start bolting things on But the idea is that you're not starting from scratch every time. You're starting from, you know, a known good point, and then you're building on top of it, right? So it's like you've got the Batmobile and Legos, and now you're adding on like all the extra crazy crap. Like that's where you would come in. You just add your stuff on instead of having to worry about like, okay, do I have the wheels? Do I have the, you know, the doors or whatever, right? It's all kind of put together for you.
So I had a question for Marty. If sorry, my cat she's just decided that she's flopped across my arms. This is terrible. So there were a couple patterns that I found interesting, one of which was the MultiCluster Dev SecOps pattern. And one thing I noticed is, one, we didn't talk about pattern states. There are a few. And then two, what is your favorite pattern?
Oh boy. Well, let's see. In order. Johnny may be better to talk about MultiCluster DevSec because he spent a bunch of time on it. So you want to talk about DevSec a bit?
Yeah. So DevSec is really just we got it from Jafar, who is the product manager for OpenShift pipelines and something else. Jafar Charabi, he's a Red Hatter. And then that really kind of came from the upstream project by Roberto Carrata, another Red Hatter, put this awesome DevSecOps pipeline stuff together. I mean, just it's been awesome. He's been presenting it for a long time. Jafar had started working on it with one of our customers, and then we got involved and we started like really converting it into the pattern framework, and that's really what MultiCluster DevSecOps is. It's a GitOps pipeline or a GitOps framework that deploys OpenShift pipelines along with like a Spring Boot application, SonarQube, some open source tools to do like static code analysis. It's got the Nexus repository on there for all your artifact storage. Uses ODF, Quay Enterprise. It's pretty much like OPP plus. It's got all this crazy crap in there. And yeah, it's, if you remember a year ago, Hillary, like that was all anybody was talking about was DevSecOps and, you know, supply chain security and all that stuff. So like it was really kind of like the effect from all that, right? Like all those conversations were happening, and we're like, we've got to have something, and so that's where it started. Right now, I'm actually starting to refactor some of it because, like, you know, as you know, with anything, right? You build something, and you learn, and you're like, okay, I could have done that a lot better. And so that's where I'm at right now. We're in the okay, I could have done that way better. So
for sure.
Refactoring some of it right now. So
you know, it's funny because you're saying like, as you know, anybody was talking about a year ago. I mean, for me, right, as an SRE, not only were we talking about it more than a year ago, we still talk about it, you know, regular security. Wow, Johnny, that's not.
I ruined this. I broke it. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Fired.
Was it this one? There it was. There it is. Okay.
Lord. For us, right, for SRE, like we are regularly doing security hardening, right? We are regularly revisiting these topics. You know, there is a new NIST standard. Well, guess what we get to go do? There is, you know, FedRAMP requirements have changed. Well, guess what we get to go do, right? So I love seeing this as a validated pattern because, you know, for us in the managed services, right, we are very, very deeply into the cattle, not pets situation. Mm-hmm. Because for each of our customers, I'm sure that their cluster is, well, some of them it's definitely cattle and some of it's were pets. So we get a whole spectrum of folks and users. And that is the beauty of the managed service. But for us, like, I can't possibly do a fleet the size that we have in a pet scenario. So we are always working on, you know, how do we do things at scale? How do we do things for, you know, current cluster fleet size? How do we do things for 10x that? How do we do things for 100x that? What happened if we had 60,000 clusters and they all had, you know, XYZ situation? We kind of look at it on that kind of, you know, enterprise-y scale because we are an enterprise-y service. And so, yeah, no, so MultiCluster DevSecOps, I will still be talking about it 5 years from now.
Oh, I'm sure.
Never going away. It will evolve, but it is never going away. But you're right. The federal government, U.S. federal government mandate for SBOMs really brought that into a very like sharp focus for a while. And now the new shiny is of course generative AI. The next new shiny will be, I'm not a crystal ball reader. Don't ask me to read those tea leaves. And but all these things, we're still gonna, there'll probably still be evolving some validated patterns against it for those of us who continue to live that previous shiny thing day to day for, I don't know, ever.
Yeah. And another thing, if you remember too, like at that time when the supply chain stuff was coming out, cosign was really starting to like drop and become popular. Like the whole, just like, I can't remember the name of the project now, but cosign for signing artifacts and stuff like that, that was a big thing. And then I think 2 or 3 quarters later, right? Like we had the Red Hat trusted artifact signer and stuff like that. So we had, like, Red Hat is actually delivering products now that do a lot of the things that cosign can do and more, right? They're signing pipelines, they're signing like the artifacts that are coming out of it, and there's just all these workflows that have kind of shifted from being like, okay, we're going to do this, we're on our way to like, okay, we're there. And so that's really where the evolution of our pattern is going to go to, right? How do we incorporate those tools? How do we deploy it better? Some of it's just a bunch of like crazy shell scripts. Like we got to fix a lot of that and just make it better.
It's always some crazy shell scripts.
Sometimes crazy shell scripts are the right answer to some problems.
That's true.
I wrote some Perl code a long time ago that's still running.
It will run forever. It will run after we're gone.
Very, very likely. But sometimes it's the right thing. It's the right thing at the time, and it's too hard to replace it.
Yeah. I mean, Cobalt still around, still used, still very, 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 very common in banking.
Although I think the reason people are still running Cobalt has less to do with Cobalt itself and everything to do with the optimizations that IBM put into the hardware platform for linear calculation speed and I/O efficiency and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true. And my father-in-law, I've mentioned this on the stream before, my father-in-law was a Cobalt engineer. He was actually a Cobalt engineer at IBM. He said, when if folks remember like the Y2K, all the banking software is going to fail, like all of the thing. He said to me, because he got contracted to go do some refactoring of code bases across various financial companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. He said to me, it wasn't that we couldn't have, made it run and like have the years built in for beyond 2000. It was just that at the time we were doing this, it was inconceivable to us that this stuff would still be there. Yeah. They didn't even think that it had that kind of a staying power. Like, oh, this is going to be replaced in like 10, 20 years tops. It's just not going to be here. And that was it. That was the entire, like, I love his perspective on, and I think there were other like situations and so forth, but his perspective on that was just hysterical to me.
Yeah. And the physics of the space involved are not, you can't just discount that because, in the 60s and 70s, when all these things were originally being written, my IT career started in the 90s. And when I started, we were still forcibly removing man pages from Unix servers that we were deploying to stores because we didn't have the space. We needed to reclaim that space on the drives for databases. In the 60s and 70s, you're talking about, 3 or 4 orders of magnitude smaller. The amount of space that's taken up by those extra 2 digits may not seem like much, but it accounts for gigabytes and gigabytes. We had a similar problem of course, we had the Y2K problem where I worked before at Red Hat, but there was a similar in dimension sort of problem that was related to the master item file table. And I used to work for a very large retailer, and there were over 1 billion items in the master item table. To add the extra digits for your date would have required, massive additional disk packs, because that data you have to bring around with you wherever you copy it, wherever you do the copybook stuff, wherever any of those records are processed. And it's not just 2 digits in one record someplace. It's 2 records for it's 2 digits for every for every copy of every record in every workflow that thing touches. And, that winds up being non-trivial for some of these really large institutions.
Well, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, because I kind of know this better from other people telling me than firsthand experience. But when you actually have to make that kind of change to a data set, doesn't that actually result in the literal way the data is stored on the machine having to be completely reconfigured?
Yes, it does.
Right. And that the computational, the CPU power required to do that on something that is billions of records is like set a server on fire. Like, it's huge.
A server, set a data center on fire.
Set a data center on fire. Yeah. Sorry. Exactly.
To say nothing of the 24 to 36 hour outage, that you can't, in a 365, 7 by 24 operation, you can't take a 36-hour outage to update, the number of digits and the date on, a field. It's unthinkable. I mean, You can ask for it, and they will drag your corpse out on on a plastic tarp.
I was about to say something, but I realized that where I was about to take that was even darker, and maybe that's too far for a work platform. But yeah, yes, yeah, no, that's a definite no, for sure. Well, that was a fun divergence. I do want to try to bring us back around to the actual validated pattern.
Yeah, tiers, pattern tiers, and my favorite pattern.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So the major pattern tiers are in accelerating order of kind of the maintenance burden. The sandbox pattern, which is the most basic one. Sandbox patterns are they've got the most minimal requirements for additional documentation and testing. Basically, they need to have worked once, and we'll post some docs to it. We don't even have to host that pattern. You can host it in your own repository space. We'll give you doc pointers to your own docs if that's what you want to do. And a lot of patterns start out that way. The next tier up is called maintained. And for a maintained pattern, we expect that this is going to run in CI at least once a quarter on a supported long-term support version of OpenShift. So, that's considerably more demanding than Sandbox, but, still fairly achievable. The highest level of pattern tier is the maintained pattern tier, which has a number of additional requirements, such as having a full reference architecture diagram, a script to validate that the pattern is installed correctly, and by script in this case we mean a narrative that describes what the different things are that are expected to work and not work, and how those things are supposed to look. And then CI is done at least once a month, and then most of our maintained patterns are tested much more frequently than that. Maintained patterns also typically involve some level of maintenance responsibility from someone on the validated patterns team directly. So we're typically either directly responsible for or very involved in the maintenance of the maintained patterns. At some point, this doesn't exist yet, we hope to have a supported pattern. And that would be, like a Red Hat product tier of pattern. That doesn't exist today, but someday we hope it will.
And Marty, I just want to. I'm sorry, Hillary. We skipped over tested. Tested is the one that's in the middle. Yeah, tested is one that's.
I said tested.
I think we did maintain twice.
Okay, sorry. Yes, tested is the middle tier. Between sandbox and maintain. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. I just want to make sure that we clarified. Yeah, everything else is spot on. Thank you.
All right. Words are hard. We didn't go to word school. Well, you might have. I didn't go to word school.
I did, so my fault.
Never mind. Words are still hard, even if you went to word school, though.
Fair enough. Now,
okay, cool.
My favorite pattern. My favorite pattern. Someday, I hope this comes back to bite me, because I hope to have a new favorite pattern, in the future. But today, my favorite pattern is Ansible Edge GitOps. And the reason that I love Ansible Edge GitOps so much is that it fuses so many different pieces of technology together. It includes Ansible Automation Platform. It includes RHEL VMs. It includes ODF for data storage. It includes virtualization. We had to solve a number of really tricky problems inside the framework to be able to make it handle the ability to load Ansible content as part of the pattern. And then the demo that sits on top of it is inductive automation ignition, which is a commonly used thing in the oil and gas industry. It's based on work that was actually done by one of our oil and gas customers. And so the Ansible Edge pattern has proven to be a useful jumping off point for other work where people want to explore, how do I install Ansible in my OpenShift cluster? How do I load content into Ansible in my OpenShift cluster? How do I address VMs that are running inside an OpenShift cluster? And also, I came up with a reasonably clever Helm chart to deploy VMs using the OpenShift virtualization operator, which I'm still, it's one of the pieces of work that I'm most happy with, because it really highlights the benefits of Helm as a technology to use in conjunction with the GitOps operator, as well as providing a lot of nifty kind of hooks to be able to do something that is inherently non-declarative, like the deployment of VMs.
I like that you qualified it as a reasonably clever Helm chart. I heard the whole thing. I loved all of it. I do think that's really cool. Especially like my last job before Red Hat was in IoT and on the edge, and like we were talking about factory floor and things like digital twins and other really cool, like fascinating topics. So like I particularly I love that this is your favorite, because I find it very like personally interesting, although like my like current like most professional interesting ones are more like the multi-cloud or multi-cluster DevSecOps, right? So that's really cool. But like I said, although I paid attention and enjoyed the entire thing, and I do like that there's that virtualization component too, because that's pretty neat. That was my favorite remark. Reasonably clever. I'm going to steal that next time I think I've done something pretty good. I'm gonna be like, it's reasonably clever.
One thing you learn about Marty over time is Marty's cold-blooded. Like his words, he's got some pretty excellent. Like we could probably have like a little book on like some Martyisms that are they're pretty awesome. So
let's start adding them to the my joke t-shirt store is down right now, but I'm gonna redo it and put it back up on because I don't actually want people buying it. I just want, every time somebody tells me I want to put that on a t-shirt, I want it represented on a digital t-shirt. I'm gonna start putting Martyisms on the digital on the joke t-shirts.
He's subtle but deadly. He'll say something and you're like, man, yeah. I think, ooh.
I like to lie in the tall grass for as long as it takes.
I like to lie in the tall grass because I'm hiding and I would like a nap. We are different people. Okay, sorry. Right. Johnny, what's your favorite validated pattern?
Ooh, I don't know if, okay, I won't be that guy and say I don't have one. I think right now it's a toss-up between Hypershift, hosted control plane, for those product people that are out there, so I'll be cheap and do the ones that I built. TravelOps and Hypershift are probably the two that I really enjoy the most. I really like Service Mesh as a product, and the TravelOps thing, it takes a lot of the work that oh man, I can't remember his name, but he's on the Service Mesh team. They took the Kiali demo and they put it into like this really, really nice workflow. And so I just kind of took a lot of the pieces of that and made it into this pattern. But if I go scale and I think about like, okay, which one is like the coolest one that I really didn't write or anything like that, I'd have to give Ansible Edge GitOps some love, just because like it's solving a really hard thing to do, like in an automated way, right? And I think that's pretty cool. And then when you think about the impact that has with our customers, and like when we talk to people and they think about like, okay, well, how can I use the framework to do what I need to do? And we start talking about the Ansible Edge stuff, like that one gets people like just jumping at it, right? Like they can't wait to start using it. So I think that was probably the coolest that I didn't write.
So do you all ever, like, not that there should be a difference. There's very rarely an opinion in the managed versions of OpenShift that would actually impact any of this. But now and again, you could hit something strange, I suppose. Do you guys ever actually test these against the managed services such as Rosa and Arrow? Mostly I care about Arrow.
I know that we have tried to test these against Rosa. I feel like MultiCloud GitOps has tested against Rosa, and it was good. I don't remember. William was the one that was going through all that back in the day, so I'm not 100%. I know he's tested some of them, but not all of them.
Yeah, and William has gone on to other things after being on the patterns team with us. I seem to remember that there were some challenges with it, but I don't remember the details.
It would only be things that expect to use cluster admin.
Well, most of the things in the framework do use cluster admin. So,
okay, they could probably do it with dedicated admin.
If dedicated admin has the privileges to install operators and make cluster level changes, then yeah, it would absolutely work.
It does. Yeah. So that would be the change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, we're pretty persnickety about cluster admin versus dedicated admin in the managed services. And I was just kind of looking at it. I would bet that would have been the problem. And the solution is either dedicated admin, or you make if dedicated admin for whatever reason lacks the appropriate permission, you could make it a different role that does have the permissions that are necessary, but is still not cluster admin. And we can, some other time I can go wax poetic about why we don't want cluster admin used by automated things in the managed services, and it all has to do with guaranteeing our it all has to do with our SLA, right?
Oh,
at the end of the day, we are promising a certain level of uptime, and we need to not be fighting with something in order to make sure that we're maintaining that. So we occasionally, S3 has some strong opinions in our managed services. Most of the time, 99.9995% of the time, you're not going to run into them. Cluster admin, you will. But let's go make these dedicated admin patterns, and then they can be available for our managed customers, and everybody's happy. It's a win-win.
It would be an interesting conversation to have, because the patterns framework sort of assumes that you're going to apply your stuff to an empty fresh cluster with the admin kube config that the installer spits out. Now, there's nothing that would prevent us from potentially using a different credential, but we'd have to put the plumbing in to enable that, and that would potentially be an interesting thing, and it might be interesting for some of our customers too.
I think it would be. I've heard from some of the people who are CSAs and so forth. They asked us, "Hey, S3, do you have anything like this?" And I said, "Oh, you need to go talk to the validated patterns team. Those are your friends, right? Those are your people for this exact type of thing." So there definitely is, I think, interest. I also just particularly find it personally interesting as well. But we are now at time, and I guess we'll just carry on this conversation without an audience. Right. So thank you, Marty, for coming on and showing us a little bit about the latest and greatest in the validated patterns. It's very, very cool to see, something that is so GitOps centric. Like, it's got so much legs under it at this point. I hope, people in the audience, if you, if you're using any of these patterns, if you find these patterns useful, please let us know. Check out the contributor guide. I did link it earlier in the stream if you want to start looking into how to contribute a pattern. And no, I don't remember my announcements, Johnny. Thank you for asking me. I'll post them when, I don't know. If it was that important, I'll put it on LinkedIn, I guess. That's how I roll. Otherwise, like I said, GitOps is not just Argo, and it's not just, not just OpenShift. In 2 weeks, our episode will have the Hive team on, and Hive is a very interesting core component to how we do a lot of the things that we do, especially in the managed services space. So I hope you all join us for that. That'll be fun. Until then, Marty, thanks again. And to the audience, I remind you to choose your technical debt wisely, hopefully by using a validated pattern. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah.